Representative Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get to my questions, I'd just like for the record to show that the USAGM reported to Congress that that so-called swanky building that you just saw pictures of would actually save the taxpayers $150 million. So let's be sure we get our facts straight as we try to
Can I respond to that?
grandstand with pictures. No,
Can I respond to
have
that?
some other questions for you. Thank you. Ms. Lake, do you agree that the U.S. Agency for Global Media should be a reliable and authoritative news source?
Yes, and unfortunately, it hasn't been.
Well, I'm glad you say that because it's really not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of law. The law requires the agency to provide news which is consistently reliable and authoritative, accurate, objective, and comprehensive. Now, you criticize the agency as not doing that, but others think that the agency was doing that up until the time that Donald Trump took office. We broadcast news to hundreds of millions of people around the world and provided a crucial counterweight to the propaganda that was coming from our adversaries. Then President Trump decided to dismantle it, USAGM, with your help and all its networks. But in my view, the most ludicrous and concerning thing that has been done was to direct the agency to engage One America News to provide content for Voice of America and your other broadcasters. So I'd like to ask you, do you think UAN, One America News, is a reliable and authoritarian news source as the law requires?
I think they do a better job than most news outlets. They cover America.
Well, let's look at some of the things that they've said, and you tell me that if you really
And by the
think
way, it was not my idea to do that. We
it's
were
under your direction and from your
Office of
president,
Cuba
who you have said is
Broadcasting
so wonderful. I'm
asked
surprised you're not
the
wearing a
Office of
MAGA hat
Cuba
here today.
Broadcasting-
But nonetheless, I'm
the Office
taking
of
my
Cuba
time back, and
Broadcasting
I wanna-
requested that we bring
I can
that
keep
in.
talking over you forever, but let's look at some of the things that the OAN did, which it was given the contract, and they're doing it, whether it's from you or from the president that you admire so. They said the leadership there told its reporters to, and I'm quoting, minimize coverage of Russian aggression. Now, do you think that's reliable and authoritative and better than other news agencies to minimize coverage of Russian aggression?
I'm not making the rundown of what airs on One America's Voice, but they have to cover, or One America News rather, they have to cover what is of interest to them and to their viewers.
But they're the ones who now have the contract to put out the news to all these different agencies that are under your direction. Shouldn't you be aware of what kind of news they're putting out?
I don't tell them what to put on the air at Voice of America because of an editorial firewall. Apparently, the CCP has more say in what goes over the air
Oh, I think
at
that's
Voice
being a
of
little
America.
ridiculous. I don't think China's over here telling OAN what they can cover.
well,
I don't
talk
think
to
China
some of
told
the
them
whistleblowers
to
who
minimize
worked at-
their coverage of Russian
Talk to
aggression.
some of the
Here's something else.
whistleblowers.
Let me ask you if you think this is a good coverage. Their programming for the agency, they were told also minimize coverage of the Pope because he has been making comments about climate change and advocating action. You think that's good coverage, not to cover the Pope? You think that's reliable and authoritative?
It's not my decision on what is
Well,
airing
you're
at
in
OAN.
charge. You're in charge.
I'm
and
not in charge of
You got the
OAN.
contract with these people, so it seems like it's your decision. Here's something else. The reports say that OAN instructed its employees to report only on good polls for Donald Trump, only on good polls, and they perpetuated the lie that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. That's the news
You know
that
what?
we're
They
putting
were one
out
of the
to the
only
rest of the
outlets
world
that-
under your leadership.
They were
Tell
one of
them-
the only outlets that had the courage to cover elections.
Oh, please. That you're going to say we're going to only cover good polls for Trump and still continue to say that the 2020 election was rigged, and that's the news we're putting out to the rest of the world, and that's the ones who have the contract.
Let me see
with
if I
you.
can pull the phone number for the person who runs OAN, and you can have a
Well, I
conversation
would hope
about
you
the
have
content.
the phone number. You're the one
I'm
who's
worried
entered
about the
into
content on
contracts with
Voice
them.
of America
If you're worried about the content,
has
then
been
why aren't you
supportive
worried
of our
about what these
adversaries.
people are saying? They're supposed to be under the law, authoritative, and reliable. And now suddenly, after knowing all these details about the number of spies and what the Chinese are doing, you don't know what OAN is doing, and that's the ones you have the contract with. I find that either.
We don't have a contract with them. We have an agreement if we want
an
to, if we want
agreement.
to
I'm
air
sorry,
their.
an agreement. And I can't believe that. I can't believe you know everything about all these other agreements, but not about the one that's doing the news for us, that's supposed to be reliable and can't cover the Pope, can't cover Russian aggression, which would mean Ukraine, can't cover that the election was legitimate, can't cover any negative polls from the president.
Congresswoman?
I'm
If
shocked.
this is just
I
one
yield back. I
option
yield
for-
back.
It's the best news I've heard all day.